This is the Parramatta Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Parramatta Eels Club, home of the Eels, and also home of Jack's Pale Ale.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. It is the tipping podcast for round number 15 of the Telstra Premiership in the NRL, and it is brought to you by Assure Strata Reports and also Buddy Oldman Masters Boxer, proud sponsors of the Paracave Podcast tipping competition, which is getting very, very interesting at the moment. So a few changes in the leaderboard. So check that one out on the socials to see if whereabouts you are. But that is round 14 is done and dusted. Round 15, it is a Origin-affected weekend as there are a few teams on the bye. But that's okay. That's okay. That gives a chance for the young players, the young stars of the game to really shine, I think. A lot of people debate about how Origin affects these rounds when there's only 5 games being played this weekend, but I don't mind it because, as I mentioned before, it gives some of the teams, some of the young players in those teams to really shine. And look, this weekend there are 7 teams having the bye: Broncos, Parramatta, Penrith, Raiders. Then the Raiders, they're having their first bye of the season, actually, so pretty handy position for them. The Melbourne Storm, the Warriors, and the Tigers have the bye. So 5 games this weekend, and it all kicks off on Thursday with the traditional rivals, the Sharks, taking on the Dragons at Shark Stadium, Shark Park, I like to call it anyway. PointsBet Stadium, if you want to call it the official stadium, I guess, but I like to call it Shark Park. What do you like to call it? They've had that many names, the old Sharks' home ground, but very interesting. But a few changes as we just pause a moment for there, get rid of that one. Sorry about that. Ronaldo Mulitalo, he returns from suspension. KL Iro, unfortunately a pectoral injury, so he is out. He's actually scored a try in his first 9 games of the season. That is a phenomenal effort from KL Iro. Toby Rudolph is listed among the reserves as he nears a return from a syndesmosis injury. For the Dragons, well, Valentine Holmes, he is on State of Origin duty. Corey Allen goes into the centres. Tyrell Sloan returns to the wing in replace of Christian Tuipulotu with a hamstring injury. So, a few changes there for the Dragons. Now, if we look at the team stats for these two sides, the last time they played was last season, 38 points to 10. The Sharks got a win over the Dragons. The Sharks have actually had the upper hand over the Dragons the last couple of times they've played. And the form guide, well, the Sharks 3 wins from their last 5, the Dragons 2 wins from their last 5. Now, they were disappointing against the Dolphins. I can't see that happening again 2 weeks in a row. Coach Flanagan, he will not accept that, I am sure. So I dare say we will not see a big scoreline like that one. The Sharks, look, they were very disappointing as well at home against the Warriors, against the red-hot Warriors, I should say. They're in the top 4, but they had 40 points put on them, and they will not want to have that put on them at home again. So they will definitely not want to lose 2 games at home in a row. So, look, I am going to tip the Sharks in this one. As I said, I just don't think they can lose 2 games at home in a row. But the Dragons will be tough to beat because, as I said, Coach Shane Flanagan, he will not want a repeat performance of that like it was against the Dolphins. The next game, one game on the Friday night, 8 p.m. Now, this is also a little bit of a talking point for myself, and I know it's also, I guess it's got to do with the broadcasters and the like, but when we have one game on a Friday night, and by the way, it is Friday the 13th, so look, this game could have anything, but when we have one game on a Friday night during this Origin period, can the NRL put it on at 7:30? 7:30 p.m. I mean, I'm getting older myself. I might not be awake at full time, but I'm just saying, you know, one game on a Friday night. Can we go back to 7:30 p.m. perhaps? Maybe it does have to do with broadcasters and time slots especially, and maybe when it goes back to 2 games on a Friday, the second game is on at 8 o'clock anyway. But look, I just reckon if there's one game, go back to 7:30 p.m. Let me know your thoughts. But it is the Titans taking on the Sea Eagles up there on the Gold Coast. The Titans, well, look, they see themselves on the bottom of the ladder. Unfortunately, Coach Des Hasler under a bit of pressure to retain his job. And they've got their best players, 2 best players out. Tino Fa'asuamaleaui and Mo Fotuaika, obviously representing Queensland Maroons. So, Cleese Haas starts at lock and Isaac Fa'asuamaleaui joins the bench. So, also a debut player as well, Josh Paxton, on NRL debut as well. So, for the Manly Sea Eagles, Tom Trbojevic, he is back from a thigh injury. Jason Saab is also set to return as well. Siwa Takiaho from a calf injury, he returns. Jazz Tavanga goes back to the bench. Toa Sipley moves to 18th man. Lehigh Hapawadi, who filled in for Tom Trbojevic at fullback, he has entered concussion protocols after suffering a Category 1 head knock against the Knights. Now, if we go to the team stats on this one, look, it does seem like Manly does have the little bit of an edge over the Titans, having won both the clashes between these two sides last season, 38 points to 8, and also 34 points to 30. The form guide, look, these two sides, I guess you could say they're struggling, really. I mean, the Titans, as I said, they find themselves on the bottom of the ladder, with Coach Des Hasler fighting for his job. So they'll be keen to get a win, obviously, to get in front. Well, they won't get in front of Parramatta, because Parramatta have got the bye. But I think they may, if they do end up winning. I'll just double check that one as we go along. But for Manly, 2 wins out of their last 5. Look, a golden point victory to the Newcastle Knights. Looked like they were going to win that one. I think they were 16-0 up at one stage and probably should have got away with that one. But golden point win to the Manly Sea Eagle, the Newcastle Knights in that one. So they'll be disappointed about that. That is for sure. About a good win against the Broncos at 4 Pines and then a loss to the Eels. So, look, they're a little bit up and down. They do have Daly Cherry Evans, who has been dropped from the Queensland Origin side in that halfback as captain. They do have the return of Tom Trbojevic and Jason Saab as well. Hamoli Olakawatu as well in the second row. All the Trbojevic brothers are playing, Ben and Jake as well. So, look, I think Manly will be too strong. But, look, you can never underestimate the Titans in this sort of a game. Even though they do have those 2 players out representing Queensland. But look, I am going to tip Manly. I think it could be a high-scoring game too, but I will tip Manly in that one. The next game is the Roosters taking on the Newcastle Knights up there at McDonald Jones Stadium, Saturday 5:30 p.m, the 14th of June. Now, for the Newcastle Knights, Kalen Ponga, obviously in Maroons camp. Fletcher Sharp, he moves back to the fullback, and Jackson Hastings comes in for his first game of the season at 5'8". Tyson Frizzell, concussion, so Matt Croker starts at prop, and Matt Arthur has been added to the bench for the Roosters. They've got a few big changes, obviously, with their representative players, Angus Crichton, and who else? I think Robert Toya as well for the Maroons. So they also have Sam Walker returning back to first grade. He did play New South Wales Cup last week. Has come through that one okay. Dom Young goes onto the wing. Mark Nwanganitawase, he moves to the centre to cover for Robert Toya. So, look, still a very strong side, the Roosters team. Look, the Newcastle Knights, you take Kalen Ponga out, one of their so-called best player up there in Newcastle. That's a big ask, isn't it? But Fletcher Sharp at fullback, he has been playing really well this season for the Newcastle Knights, mostly in the 5'8" spot, but the Newcastle Knights do have another half 5'8" combination, so I could find that a little bit disruptive again. You want consistency in your halves at least, but so they haven't had that, and they haven't had that not just this year but for a long time, to be honest. So I think it will be a Roosters win. These two sides, they usually have pretty close games. Only played the once last season. It was a 22 points to 20 win for the Roosters up at Newcastle, and then the year before that, 2023, was an 18-16 win to the Roosters as well, up in Newcastle as well. The form teams, well, you could say that the Roosters, 3 out of their last 5, they've won. The Newcastle Knights, 2 out of their last 5. You could say that the Roosters are the form side out of these two. The Roosters are in 10th spot. The Knights are in 15th spot. So the Roosters, for me, will get the job done. Sorry to the United podcast up there. That they will be disappointed that I'm tipping the Roosters. They'll be confident as that they can get the job done against the Roosters after their win against Manly. But yeah, look, I just think the Roosters, with James Tedesco still there, that is a big in for the Roosters. They have been, usually this time of year he's not playing for the Roosters, he's playing for Origin, but just to have his experience in this side, it's a big deal, I think. Also, Victor Radley in the lock position as well. Young forward pack, but I think the Roosters will get the job done in that one. The next game for the weekend is 7:35 p.m. up in Townsville. It is the Cowboys taking on the Dolphins. Now, two Queensland teams there. A little bit of Origin representation for Queensland for both sides, with obviously Tom Dearden taking over as Queensland halfback, but there's also Ruben Cotto, Jeremiah Nanai, Reece Robson for New South Wales, and they've also got a couple of suspensions as well. So congratulations to Scott Drinkwater, he takes over as captain, but they do have some big ins as well. Murray Tuilagi and Jason Taumalolo as well return from injury. So there is a few changes in that side. Jake Clifford comes into the halfback spot for Tom Dearden. So they have all of those players out. For the Dolphins, Jake Averillo, he goes back to fullback with the Hamaso Tabuai-Fidow representing the Queensland team. Max Feeney, he comes into the centres. Ray Stone, what a player. I love Ray Stone. He returns from a shoulder injury on the bench as well. Now, unfortunately, Max Plath, I think it's an ACL injury for him. He is out. A big loss for the Dolphins. Look, this Cowboys team, they are up and down, aren't they, this season? I just can't see, they just don't seem to get it right consistently for me. They've had one win out of their last 5. They've had a draw as well. The Dolphins, they've got 3 wins out of their last 5. They smashed the Dragons last week, 56 points to 6. They did beat the Bulldogs 3 weeks ago. That was an Origin-affected game, but that was still 44 points to 8 against the competition leaders, and they did beat the Eels as well. They went just down to the Warriors, 16 points to 12. Last season, they met in around May, the 4th of May, Star Wars Day. It was a 28 points to 26 win for the Dolphins. Look, I think the Dolphins are going to get this one done, even with the hammer out. Obviously out representing Queensland, but I just think they will get that job done against the Cowboys. I just can't see the Cowboys, as I said, they've been a little bit up and down for me, so I just can't see them getting that job done, unfortunately, even though they might surprise me. My tipping this year has been absolutely woeful. Now, for the last game on the Sunday, it is another game at Accor Stadium. It should be a reasonably big crowd. Obviously not as big crowd as the King's Birthday Monday game or the Good Friday game between these two sides, as they were public holidays, but still should see a reasonably big crowd, I'd say, at Accor Stadium. Both of these teams play out of there, the Rabbitohs and the Bulldogs. For the Rabbitohs, obviously Latrell Mitchell is with the Blues camp. So Jai Gray, I don't mind Jai Gray, good player. He goes back to fullback. Jaden Sullivan moves to 5'8". Cody Walker, unfortunately injured again, groin injury. So that sees Jaden Sullivan come in. Jamie Humphries takes over at halfback, I should say. Sorry. So that is a couple of changes there for the Bulldogs. Now this one is interesting. Lockie Galvin, he goes into the starting side at 5'8" with what's his name? Sorry, I've just had a mind blank. Matt Burton. He's in the Blues camp now. Poor old Matt. He's the 18th man. He has been for New South Wales for a long time. So, unfortunately, Matt can't play in this game, being the 18th man. If you were the 19th, 20th man for a Origin team, I think you can go back and play, but not the 18th man. So he has been in this position a few times now. But look, I guess, pretty handy replacement for Burton with Lachlan Galvin just slotting into that 5'8" spot. Jacob Kiraz goes into the centres to replace Stephen Crichton, who's on Origin duty. Blake Wilson comes onto the wing for the Bulldogs as well, pretty handy player. Josh Curran goes to the front row with Max King representing New South Wales. Jacob Preston, that is a big boost for the Bulldogs. He goes back into the second row after serving his, I think it was 5-match suspension. So Kurt Mann is representing Queensland, so he is out of this Bulldogs side. Jake Turpin and Kurt Moran are the new faces on the bench. So, look, this game could go either way, obviously, but I think the momentum of the Bulldogs side, they've probably... Look, they are missing their best player, Stephen Crichton, and also Max King as well, but they still have a pretty fairly good forward pack there. And the back line is still pretty much the same as what played last week, except for Blake Wilson, who didn't play against the Eels. So it's still a pretty handy side that the Bulldogs still have, and that inclusion of Jacob Preston back from suspension is a good one for them. The Rabbitohs, look, take out Latrell Mitchell from that side, their best player, and also the injury to Cody Walker as well. A couple of big losses for them. I am going to tip the Bulldogs in this one to get the job done. So, my tips for this weekend... Only the 5 games being played. Hopefully I can get 5 out of 5. Had a dismal week last week, 3 out of 8. But that's the way it is this year. But my tips for this week are the Sharks, Sea Eagles, Roosters, Dolphins, Bulldogs. And now I will hand over to Ella to give her tips for round number 15.
Hi, it's Ella from the Parramatta podcast, and since I'm not on the tipping podcast this week again, I'll share my tips from this again. So I'm going Sharks, Manly, Roosters, Dolphins and Bulldogs. Bye!
Thanks, Ella, and good luck. Ella actually out-tipped me last week, doubled my score, got 6 out of 8. So well done, Ella, for getting 6 out of 8. I only got 3 out of 8. How poor is that? Look, let me know your tips, and I actually have the feeling that a lot of people are going to be tipping the same this week, so we may just happen to see a lot of perfect rounds this weekend. There may be the odd change here and there, but let me know your tips. Are they the same as Ella's and mine? Because we have to actually tip the same this week, so probably Parramatta's not playing, so she didn't have to tip against Parramatta. I didn't have to tip Parramatta, so there we go. We both might get a perfect round, but I've got a feeling a lot of people will get a perfect round this week because of these games that are being played. Look, and as I said, it is Origin affected, but look, it gives the young boys a crack to play some first grade. Thank you very much for listening to the Tipping Podcast for round number 15. Enjoy your footy over the weekend, and then State of Origin game number 2 is only around the corner next Wednesday night, the 18th of June. Cannot wait for that game number 2. That one is in Perth. I'll do a preview of that one a little bit later, probably early next week. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Enjoy your footy over the weekend. And who knows what I'll be doing on the weekend without Parramatta playing. So I won't have to worry about them losing, going through that stress. Hey, but I will be watching these games, that is for sure. All right, thank you very much. Catch you later. The Para Cave Podcast, by the fan, for the fans. Go Para! How you going, mate? Are you a Para Cave Podcast listener?
I am, bro. It's a great podcast. Everyone tune in.
Go Para!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Parramatta Podcast. See you next time.